Hello, everybody. I'm MoreGravity. Let's play chess. Our chess play today consists of a study of a game I finished about an hour or two ago. I had the white pieces. Let's get it going. E4, E5, King's Gambit, and this is a classic way to decline the King's Gambit with with Knight C6. I played Knight F3. This is to be recommended for white in most King's Gambits, so that as to prevent Queen to H4 check. A nasty check, which can come, supposing I played D4, or I played Bishop C4, it doesn't really matter, Bishop B5, maybe even Knight C3, Pawn to C4 can be in the mix. Queen H4 check by black can be devastating against white's king side, as protecting doesn't always do so, blocking doesn't always do all that well, and sometimes the king is forced to move. So I played Knight F3, it's the recommended move. And with Bishop to D6, we can see that my opponent has really placed his bishop in an awkward position to continue to defend the E pawn on E5. So I trade this off. I think that was best move just to get things a little clearer. White's going to be sooner to castle, or at least has that opportunity or higher likelihood. And let's see what evolves from this. D4. White's dark squared bishop is in the game without having to move. I've played D4 here, and I have now more space with which to work, and I'm staking a stronger claim at the center, at this sweet center of these four squares. Knight takes F3 by black is a logical and excellent move. I recapture with my queen on F3. Now what's happened here? The material is even, all right? So we'll do some of our 6-force analysis. Material's even. White has more space. King safety is just about even. White has better mobility. And the clock favors black by not all that much, but some amount here. And the initiative in this position probably is with white, even though it's black's turn to move. So white's winning on many fronts, non-material, right? I don't have an extra pawn or 2 pawns. I don't have an extra bishop and 8 rooks or anything crazy like that. But white is winning based on all the other immaterial, or not immaterial as in not important or bad or wrong or unrelated, but white's winning on all the other fronts. So my opponent played queen to H4 check, and I block with the move pawn to G3. And after my opponent then moves back to E7, moves the queen back to E7, I say thank you for the fianchetto, or and sometimes white would be playing bishop to H3 here and claiming this diagonal before the black light squared bishop can claim it by moving the D pawn. I just played calmly, C3. You know, the computer eval goes nuts because I probably should have taken advantage of some opportunity like E5 right away here, and isn't then black's bishop under a lot of fire. I have to step out of the E file I have to step my king out of the E file in some manner, and then the pawn on E5 can go forth and capture the bishop on D6. And Stockfish likes, above all of that, bishop C4. Simple development. and having a huge control of the center, a king that's going to be safer at least for a while, a clear target, a lot of mobility, then white will be clearly winning here, or have a strong advantage. I picked up a piece. Let's see what white can do with it. Now it's a piece for 2 pawns, so it's not the strongest way to be ahead of piece, but I'm still pursuing a material trade strategy. If the queen on e5 wants to capture on e2 with check, then I'll just capture back, probably with the bishop, maybe with the king, I don't know. And I'll be fine with my chances going into an endgame where I have a 1-point material lead. You can see that down here. That near my name, MoreGravity, I have 1 point of a material lead. Bishop takes e2, as prognosticated, just means predicted, foretold, portended, envisioned, said. So white castles kingside, and that's fine. We're not all too worried about this, especially since black has no dark squared bishop. Right, there's no dark squared bishop on the board for black, so that's part. And there's no queen on the board for black, so I'm not going to be checked along this long diagonal staring straight at my king. That's part of the reason why kingside castles was a fine move when it was. And then my opponent, simple threat to simple response here. Rook at f8 moves to e8, claiming the e file and attacking my bishop that was there. So just simply moving him out of the way. Realizing that of the places available, f3 is great. It keeps black, at least for the time being, babysitting the pawn on b7. And the bishop on f3 is also eyeing all these squares so as to hem in, imprison, fence in, and stymie the movement of black's knight on f6. See how this shape here with 2 squares in between knight and bishop will have the knight dominated by the bishop, or conversely, the bishop dominated by the knight. Right? So we want to notice this pattern. It makes a V here with the bishop at the lower apex on f3. And we're controlling much of the knight's movement. And as in this situation, the other 4 black pieces on light squares nearby also hinder this knight's movement. D7 to D5, and then bishop to G5. Bishop to G5. If you have I have the bishop pair, and we all have 3. No, okay. I have 3 minor pieces. My opponent has 2 minor pieces. If I mean, what a dream would it be to trade off my dark squared bishop on f6, causing black to lose his knight, and when upon recapturing, to have a severe a set of doubled pawns on the f pawn that are seriously and severely hindered. Right, that's part of it, and to do so by trading off the bishop that is the opposite color to the c8 bishop. That's a boon. That's a clear positional or structural win for white. If you think about it, otherwise, if I trade off my light squared bishop for this knight somehow, not right now, but another square, and then this bishop somehow bites it on the 6th rank from one of these pawns, then we're at odds with the colored squares of our bishops. And you'll remember that bishops of different color, like white's black squared bishop and black's light squared bishop will very often build pawn chains and endgames that end in a draw. They have a drawing tendency because you can create a barricade along. For black's case here, the white squares, and for white's case here, the black squares. My opponent plays bishop h3. It's a fine move. And trying to trade might have been a little bit overzealous, but I got the trade anyway. And now we're back to our dream scenario where I'm probably going to be able to trade on the f file. What did I do? Let's see. Alright, so my opponent wants to avoid this doubling of pawns on the king's side, and I can't blame him, her, they for that. Knight to d2 is seen as a inaccuracy, perhaps so, but short of knight to a2 or short of knight to d2, how is white gonna free the rook on a1 and make the knight on b1 part of the game? So you gotta, it's this type of thing where the computer wants to push this move farther and further and farther and further beyond the computer's calculating horizon. So it will consider this as not the optimal move for that reason. Just push it farther and farther until some end game where then it's really bad for white. All of a sudden, that method collapses, and black all of a sudden has two rooks on the first rank and can afford to spend a rook on knight on b1. Then I capture back. Then black's other rook captures on b1, and all told, black has won a full piece. Computers are pushing sort of moves of this nature where, so this thing where if a piece is trapped or something like that, the engines don't get it. Another example would be, you see here, there's a rook on a8. Yes, this, imagine that it's a white pawn on a7. Karpov played the move bishop to b8, and the bishop is protecting the pawn is protecting a bishop, and the rook is so clearly out of the game. To break free by capturing some material, the rook is lost to capture Karpov's bishop, and not only that, but there's a queen born of the enemy in that very same process. By a7 takes b8 equals queen. And if the rook wants to stop white from queening by capturing on a7, then white's bishop on b8 captures that rook. And the rook has been lost for a mere pawn. So it's those types of situations, if you're playing, I don't know who plays against computers anymore, but computers are sometimes having a bit of a difficulty seeing the trappedness, if that's a word, the nature of how trapped the lonely rook on a8 might be after Karpov played bishop to b8. So here there were some, I might have played bishop to f4 here. It's probably the best move. But instead, pawn to h3, I think trades material in a way that's great for white anyway. Right, so white's gonna have the command of this board right here in terms of material, and my opponent might think he's winning a knight on d2 here. He's a check to my king, and he's splitting the defense, so to speak, that if my king moves, which would be a natural response, then I lose my knight. So it's not a bad try. It's also the best move on the board. And I block with rook to f2. Can trade rooks, or if he goes for the knight, I will be up the exchange after recapturing on d2. So that happens, and I like the idea to double on the e-file here too. It forces me to find the correct continuation again, and I did with rook f1. And pretty much as play unfolds, I think in some sense maybe a critique would be, I don't know, because on the one hand these are great tries to force white to play accurately. On the other hand, if white does play accurately, then all the pieces remaining on the board are traded off, except for white having one knight on the board. And when there are a lot of pawns and one minor piece on the entire board, a lot of pawns to both sides, and one side has a minor piece and the other side doesn't have any pieces, the side with the minor piece has huge chances at closing down the win and collecting pawns, capturing pawns, and making way for his own pawns to promote on the enemy's back rank. So my opponent here tries rook e1 to avoid trades, and I think white just does well to capturing a pawn on g5 is not a problem, and sooner or later black runs out of ideas, but also slips into this mate in 1 on f8, which is fine. It's a good way to, that's one way that that game could end. But we also notice that white is doing very, very well, even without the mate in 1. If black plays, let's practice here, if black plays h6, then we're pretty sure white can manage a strong finish here by promoting a pawn sooner or later. All right. Well, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching. I'm MoreGravity. Have a great night. If you're here on the East Coast of the United States, and wherever you are in the world, have a great time. Thanks for watching.